The basic question of women's history is simply this: where are the women and what are they doing? Where are the women while the kings make decisions, while the army commanders set forth with their troops, while um, the clergy preach their sermons and so on? What are the women doing? Ordinary women. Well, um, this is an engraving by French artist Jacques Callot, who during the 30 Years' War made a famous series of 18 engravings called The Miseries of War. He did this in 1633. And in this instance, the question of where are the women can be answered literally. The most prominent woman in the engraving is at the lower left. And she's being grabbed by one of the marauders and probably about to be raped or murdered or both. And being victims of war is not just something that happens to women in war. Men and boys are also victims. But victimhood is perhaps the stereotypical role that comes most readily to mind when thinking about women and war. This romanticized painting of the murder of Jane McCrae illustrates the point. McCrae was killed early in the Saratoga campaign in 1777 during the War for American Independence. And an account of her death, that she was murdered and scalped by Native American allies of the British, spread like wildfire all over upstate New York and greatly inflamed American anger toward both the British and the Native Americans, and sparked a degree of resistance to the British that might not otherwise have occurred. And this is the account that's portrayed in this well-known painting by John Vanderlyn, which was done in 1804. The account is inaccurate, therefore the painting turns out to be inaccurate. The actual story is somewhat different. McCrae was at this time at the home of a neighbor, one Mrs. McNeil, that was attacked by Native Americans. And Jane and Mrs. McNeil were violently seized. They were carried off and placed on a horse, and Native Americans were making off with them. There was a fort nearby. There were American men that came out trying to recapture the women. They fired shots at the Native Americans. One of those shots hit Jane McCrae and knocked her from the horse. She was badly wounded, and she was then scalped by Native Americans at that point and left upon the ground. So that's the actual story. It's still a terrible story of an atrocity, but it's not as shown in here. This depiction essentially operates within another stereotype about women's involvement with war, and that is the idea of women as what's been called the beautiful soul. And this is a stereotype about women in general, as being soft and nurturing, and of epitomizing the best values of a society, and also the sort of the quote unquote weaker sex that men are supposed to be protecting. And so this is the second stereotype, very powerful, about women and their connection with war. And so propaganda posters and of the 20th century often portray women as being endangered by the German brutes during the First World War, Japanese soldiers during the Second World War, and so on. And these were designed to appeal to people at a really a primal level, because this image of women is so very, very powerful.